And red wine was just that magical, cure all elixir. Whenever I had an inkling then that maybe I was consuming too much, probably in the throes of a hangover, I consoled myself, I'm just a social drinker and I never drink alone like those alcoholics do.
Tell me about your relationship with stress during that time, and or before, if you have, you know, your relationship with stress before law school, before your legal career, anything you want to share about that as well.
Yeah. So this I always was probably quite a stress case. I think I would just get wound up, very tight, like just very reactive, all of that, and would try to cope with it, usually with maybe physical activity, socializing, that type of thing. But alcohol entered that picture pretty early on. I started, as a social drinker, like many people do, but then the alcohol became part of that stress response. I don't know if you're familiar with Elizabeth Vargas. She's a TV journalist who wrote a book about her own struggles with alcohol. And she talked about her alcohol consumption as going from magic to medicine to misery. And that's a pretty good framework for my story with alcohol and stress as well, with thankfully for me, a miraculous mindset shift at the end. I actually didn't drink in high school, but then I more than made up for that with binge drinking in college and law school. I had so many bad choices, blackouts, horrific hangovers, but it seemed like most other people around me did as well. Now, maybe part of that was the fact that I was in the Midwest, which is a really heavy drinking area. And then when I started my legal career at that big firm in the mid 90s, I traded the cheap beer and the Long Island iced teas for wine. First I was a white wine drinker and then red wine. And red wine was just that magical, cure all elixir. Whenever I had an inkling then that maybe I was consuming too much, probably in the throes of a hangover, I consoled myself, I'm just a social drinker and I never drink alone like those alcoholics do. I didn't need alcohol at that time, but I thought it made life more fun, made me more fun, and helped me to connect with colleagues and clients. It quickly became part of my identity. But then I started picking wine not by the name or the pretty logo on the bottle, but on another part of the label, on the alcohol content. The higher, the better. So then by the time I was in my late 30s, I had two preschool age kids, busy careers, civil litigator, still busy even on a reduced hour schedule. And then my husband had just been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was around that time that I discovered the power of a glass of wine on a weekday evening to relax and unwind, to quiet the mind that was almost always thinking either about work or what a bad mom I was. And it helped me to fall asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow, or maybe earlier. I didn't know then that we are so much more likely to become addicted to alcohol when we're using it for stress relief than when we're drinking socially. And my brain did exactly what it was supposed to do. It developed a tolerance, and then I started to need more and more for the same effect. So it wasn't long before that glass of wine every night became at least a bottle almost every night, sometimes with margaritas before the wine. Like many other state bars, California has had mandatory continuing legal education on substance abuse for decades. And every time I would go to my required lecture, I would typically leave reassured that, well, I must not have a problem because I'm not as bad as those other people who were telling us their stories. And the alcohol wasn't talking back to me. It was not getting in trouble at school. And it was that kind of glue holding the proverbial shit show together. Then now cue the misery music for this part of it. So a friend of mine once said, alcohol is the great escape until it isn't. So by now I'm in my mid 40s and I've got a family member making a comment about my drinking after a long weekend together. He said something about, so is that your sleeping pill? Is that what you use alcohol for at night? And it was really more of an observation than a criticism, but it stuck with me and I started to question my consumption. But unfortunately, my answer for that question was just more drinking so I could try to ignore it. And I didn't make any changes. Again, I wasn't driving under the influence, showing up drunk for school events. I was getting my work done, and I knew so many people who were drinking at least as much, if not more, than I was. I knew about recommended daily maximums, but I kept trying to convince myself that those don't really apply to me because I'm 6'2". So I thought, well, I don't have to apply. I don't have to follow the women's guidelines. But at this point, I was pretty much needing wine every night, whether I was at home or on a trip. As a family, then we were going to national parks as often as possible. And after we'd hike and explore all day, my husband and kids would go to sleep, and I'd sit up alone in the hotel room or the vacation rental and drink my bottle of wine. My darkness was really growing at that point, and I did start to struggle with suicidal ideation. I've got this nasty, nasty inner critic who was trying to convince me at that time that the world would be better off without me. I knew I did some good in the world, but I just couldn't seem to stop being this mom who yelled at her kids. And I sadly was not connecting the dots then with my alcohol use. Like this survival tool couldn't possibly be the source of my struggles. But that close brush with suicidality did scare me. So I embarked on a self improvement mission. I got back into therapy, and I didn't like being so dependent on alcohol. I thought setting a really bad example for my kids on how to cope. So I started at that point my 5-year journey with attempts to moderate and get control. I never tried to stop drinking. Why would I do that? But I tried all the rules, only 2 drinks per night, no drinking on weeknights, no drinking after a certain time, you name it, nothing stuck. I was really disciplined in other areas of my life, but I just couldn't seem to moderate my drinking. And then that cognitive dissonance was growing because I was continuing to do exactly what I was trying not to do. So I'd wake up in the middle of the night, upset I'd consumed a bottle again, vow that I wasn't going to drink or was going to drink less that next day, and then just break that promise to myself come evening, wash, rinse, repeat over and over. So whether I was like beating myself up for drinking the night before, wondering why am I struggling to make this change, deciding what my attempted maximum would be for that night, or figuring out what I needed to get done before I could start drinking, I was thinking about alcohol in one way or another almost all the time. It's like I was a prisoner in my own mind and it was just getting worse. Then I remembered that many years before that, I was appearing in dependency court as a volunteer court appointed special advocate for foster youth. And I saw this mom there whose kids had been removed by Child Protective Services due to some substance abuse. And I remember thinking, gosh, I can't imagine how a mom could choose a substance over her children. But as my misery grew, I understood. Alcohol had become my best friend, and it was always there for me to help me numb and escape. It was that quick stress relieving tool. And I feared that if push came to shove, I too might choose alcohol over my kids. So now we're at the COVID-19 lockdown, mid March 2020. I just started another attempt at moderation, probably a Lenten resolution to either not drink on weeknights or maybe only drink half a bottle on a weeknight. But whatever it was, I was failing miserably. So I started Googling, am I an alcoholic? And I bought a book called This Naked Mind. And I read the book. And then I was sold on trying this 30-day experiment, which is a challenge to give up alcohol for 30 days as an experiment of sorts, filled with daily emails and videos. That next 30 days there included my husband's birthday, my birthday, a family trip to Montana, and my niece's wedding. So I always say, go big or go home. And it wasn't easy, but it was way easier than I ever anticipated, thanks to that mindset shift that I had experienced. Instead of telling myself I couldn't drink or I shouldn't drink, I no longer wanted to drink. my conscious mind knew for years that alcohol wasn't serving me anymore, but that book and that guided break convinced my subconscious mind of that. And then I was able to finally align with my behavior with what I wanted to do. So then, as alcohol became small and irrelevant in my life, I had that inescapable tug on my heart to help others reframe the role of alcohol in theirs. I didn't know how or when I would do that. And I received an email about a coaching certification program. I had never envisioned myself as a coach for anything beyond maybe my daughter's preschool T ball team. But I'd also never felt such a strong tug to pursue something as this pull to help other people who were struggling like I was. So I thought, well, maybe I should become a therapist. Lord knows I've been a huge fan of therapy myself over the years. But then I realized that it was really coaches of all types that have had such a positive impact on me. And I decided that, this is the route I'm going to do. I'm going to get this coaching certification and just see where this leads. I always love that Ram Dass quote that we're all just walking each other home. And then now, as a coach in this space, I've got that great fortune of accompanying other people on their journeys to reframe alcohol, free themselves of the chains of that, and just become the best versions of themselves.